All right, this is a Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back once again with my co-host Brian Solomon.
Hello there, Al. I'm happy to be here as always.
Yes, and my original co-host returning to the PWI podcast. It's our 10th anniversary, Dan.
Is it really?
Yes, we started this podcast 10 years ago. I think it was leading up to WrestleMania. I guess that was 32.
Wow.
Or one, whatever it was that year. Yeah.
Well, your anniversary gift is in the mail. It's
thank you, Dan. You're looking great. How are things?
I'm doing all right, doing well. Finally, the Murph has returned to the PWI podcast. I can say that. So, yeah, thank you for having me. It's nice to be back here.
Yes. Well, you've got a new book that I want to talk to you about. You got two very accomplished wrestling authors here with me, both with news about new wrestling books. A lot of people, well, I mean, I guess given our age, some people haven't heard of either of the guys that you're writing about, but I'm guessing even fewer have heard about the guy you're writing about, Dan. So we'll talk about that in a moment, and also we'll cover the news of the day. Thankfully, it hasn't been too crazy, but there is news with talk of WrestleMania going to Saudi Arabia. We've got some. Basically a lineup for the first Wrestlepalooza on ESPN, including the return of AJ Lee, Brock Lesnar, and a lot more. So we'll talk about it all in a moment. Right now, let me tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It has got the lovely Willow Nightingale on the cover, who is from my neighborhood. I drive by the tattoo and piercing shop where she used to work all the time. And fittingly, since we're going to be talking about the independents, this issue is very indie heavy. I was just reading Kevin's note before coming on here, and talks a bit about that. And one of the things he mentions here, Brian, I haven't asked you about this, and I'd be interested in both your thoughts. This is the first issue that we are not doing arena reports, and which is a staple of the magazine going back. I don't know. I mean, it's got to be at least 40 years. And I think understandably, it's a different world. They don't mean what they used to. So shifting more toward covering indie cards versus just sort of all the wrestling cards in the country. I think you'd both be interested in this. And I think I'm okay saying this. I had dinner with Stu Sachs last weekend, and we were chatting about it. And he told me that, one of the big reasons they even started arena reports was kind of to stick it to WWE. This is when they were sort of feuding, and wanted to expose that you guys are running the same card every night with the same results every night. So,
which is funny because that's why I always thought that it started out as an antiquated thing to do, because I didn't realize they were doing that on purpose. Because I'd look at it going like, okay, so, gone are the days that because even the WWF used to do a different show in every town. Even in the early Hogan years, they were still doing that. Yeah. But probably by like 88 or so, 87, 88, that was not the case anymore. And it always seemed like, do we really need this? It's just kind of like the same thing over and over. But I guess that was their whole point.
Yeah. Was this ever your job, Dan, at the magazine? Did you ever have to put these together?
No, thankfully I never did. I mean, I even reading the arena reports at times was tedious. Trying to put it together would just be that would be a nightmare. But it is always a little bit sad where a traditional piece goes away. But I think you're probably right. The time has passed. Arena reports are no longer relevant, and maybe they were never really relevant to begin with. But it is something that I remember, when I discovered the magazine, like all of us, you flip through, you read through those reports, you see, what was happening in house shows, and it was interesting. But it's part of the business that's not around anymore.
Yeah. Well, there's so much else here about, again, if you're looking for like a feature on a big WWE star, this isn't the issue, but there is a lot here about maybe folks you have heard of if they are local to your indie, or a lot of opportunity to learn about folks making waves all over the country. We got features on Manders, on Akira, who is becoming a big name in Japan. Paul Walter Hauser, the actor who has dipped his feet into wrestling, and even a feature about wrestlers playing baseball, banana ball, which is something apparently a phenomenon that I knew nothing about and was getting educated.
I'm going to see it next weekend, actually.
So this is a thing?
So it's the Savannah Bananas. It's basically the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. Okay. And it's really taking off. It's a form of what you definitely call sports entertainment, where I mean, that sums it up. It's the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball. They do ridiculous things on the field. They play a team that has absolutely no chance against them. They dance, they do the whole thing. And they're playing at Yankee Stadium. And I got invited to come down. I'm taking my son. The only thing that feels weird about it to me is it's going to be the first baseball game he's ever gone to. So I want to be like, listen, don't get your hopes up. They're not all like this, okay? It's not,
Dad, where's the guy on the stilts? How come there's no guy on stilts batting this game? And I guess with the Bananas, if a fan catches a foul ball, it counts as an out.
Yeah, I just learned that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's fun. It's definitely entertaining, but you do have to set the boundaries that this is not the baseball you'll see for the rest of your life.
And I think I might have mentioned it on here before, but we used to have a hockey team out here, a minor league hockey team called the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, and I think they still exist, but maybe now they've been incorporated into the NHL farm system. But they used to have their own little league. It was like an Atlantic Coast League. The games were real games. This is very strange. The games were real hockey games. They had worked hockey fights. Not kidding.
Wow.
Worked fights where all of a sudden the lights would go down. There'd be a spotlight on the two players. They'd do this silly, like, we're going to parry with the hockey sticks, but not really hurt each other. And then the game would continue. Very strange.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's interesting thinking about like sports entertainment as broader than just pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one that I'd certainly put in the category and used to go to a fair amount, especially when my kids were smaller, is monster trucks. And they would do, especially like in between the big monster truck races, they would do, like ATV races with your local New York team battling whatever from some rival state. And it was clearly always a work, so it's all to say that I guess pro wrestling is not the only work sport. Roller hockey is the other one, I guess, that comes to mind. Right?
There's roller derby. There's things like celebrity boxing and stuff like that. Like I always used to say, I even wrote about it in one of my books, how Vince McMahon's biggest problem about that term sports entertainment is the fact that sports entertainment and pro wrestling are not really interchangeable terms. Pro wrestling is a form of sports entertainment, but there's lots of other forms. And so to just call it that's what my biggest problem with it is. I don't dispute that it's sports entertainment, but it's a specific kind. Call it what it is. You know what I mean?
Right. It's pro wrestling, which is in the category of sports entertainment. Yeah.
Right.
If you had like a shelf of VHS tapes, like in the old video stores, you'd have sports entertainment, then you'd have WWE alongside, I guess, the Globetrotters,
right? American Gladiators, right? There's a lot of things like that.
Yeah. Anyhow, you can read about the Savannah Bananas, and I guess there's a fair amount of crossover with pro wrestling because there's a fair amount of independent pro wrestlers on the team, and a lot else over at PWI-online.com. Subscribe, and you don't have to worry about finding the magazine at your newsstand. We are just putting to bed the 2025 PWI 500, now getting into grading season for from here we could do the women's. I think we're still at 250. How much is Dan? You kind of started all the stuff with the women. So what was it at first? Was it?
It was the female 50, and then we went to the women's 100, and then now it's 250, I think. Yeah. But I mean, I remember when I pitched the female 50 to Stu, and he's like, "Are there really 50 worthwhile women out there?" And I mean, towards the end, we had people who had only had a handful of matches. We had some, lesser known indies to kind of fill it out. But man, now I mean, 250, and there's still a lot of quality females. So you're probably not including that 250. I mean, that's how much it's grown over the past 15 years or so.
Yeah. Do you miss this, Dan? Do you miss being?
Not at all. Not for a moment.
The 500. What would usually be your workload on the 500 bag? You used to do a lot of it.
Yeah. I would basically, we would have the ranking meeting, and I would generally go down there to the office, and we'd rank.
You were driving from Buffalo to essentially like suburban Philadelphia.
Yeah. And then we started doing it online, but I did like going down there once a year to go into the office and go through the photo archives and everything. Just for my own entertainment and the history nerd in me finding all those old photos. But we'd rank as many as we could in one day, which might take us into like the 70s, and it would always be which USO is higher. When you get to the point where you're trying to split a tag team based on who gets the pinfall the more often, like that's kind of when we knew like we were done for the day. And then they would have me finish the list, and then I'd bring it back to the team and say, okay, what do we think? Any changes, any omissions, anyone needs to move? And then I would pretty much write the bios from 250 to 500, and they'd split up the first half, and I would just take the second half. But invariably, we'd run into trouble. It's like, hey, can you also pick up these additional 50 or whatever? But yeah, the back end of the 500 is what I kind of focused on writing.
It's huge, yeah. I mean, I just wrapped up mine about a week ago, and I have the first 30. So I got 1 to 10, which are the longer ones, and then 20 of the smaller ones. You done now, Brian?
I'm done. It was actually close to the wire this time because I was away in Vegas for 10 days, and I lost some time. Not 10 days. I'm sorry, like a week. But it's funny you mentioned this. I was on Bob Smith's podcast the other day talking about the book. And he was telling me about the very, very beginning when he used to write the entire thing himself, the whole thing. And he told me how like it was miserable. Like nobody in the office wanted to even come near him because he was just angry and would snap at people. It was just such a slog to get through. I just can't imagine
totally see
one person doing the whole thing. I can't even imagine.
Yeah. I know, Dan, you had a ridiculous workload for years on this. What was the first year that you worked on the 500?
Oh, it's tough to tell because I kind of started stringing with the magazine in '97, and then I would kind of contribute on the 500. I mean, I wasn't in the office, I wasn't staff, I wasn't anything like that, and it just kind of gradually happened. So I don't know the first year I really started. Maybe I don't know 2004, 2005. I don't quite know. It just became Stu and Brandy asking for feedback, and Dave Lenker, and then I kind of got more and more involved with it.
Yeah. I realized that. I don't know if it's with this year's issue or maybe last year that I've now been part of more than half of them. So I think
wow,
it's my 18th, 19th, something like that. 07 was the first I did it. So yeah, it's become a part of my year, and it's both like super fulfilling and a giant pain in the ass every year.
I knew it was bad when I was having dreams about writing bios.
Oh, every year, yes,
right. And then you'd wake up and think, oh wait, what? Oh, I didn't really write those bios. I dreamt about the one I remember specifically was writing Rhino's bio for whatever reason, and waking up, I'm like, oh god. I didn't actually write that. Now I have to go and write it. And I'm trying to remember what I had dream written to write into the, it haunts your mind. It's crazy.
My biggest problem is that I get slotted somewhere in the middle usually of the list. And so I have to do a lot of research. And I always think to myself, if I'm doing the people more towards the top that I'm way more familiar with, I could probably do a bunch of these off the top of my head, just what I know, remember and know of what they did. Some of these guys, I have to be like, oh my God, let's go to cage match and break it down. And what the hell, where do they wrestle? And that slows it down.
Imagine doing that before cage match. Imagine doing that. When I first started doing the back end of the 500.
People were setting in, right?
What was that?
We were getting VHS tapes in the mail, right?
VHS tapes in the mail and the big packets, and Brandy would get the packets and just forward them on to me. These big boxes of 8x10s. But the thing is, it was also backyard wrestlers who had like come up with these ornate backstories and characters and names and federations that they worked for. And if you weren't careful, like, okay, maybe this person's worthy of consideration. You had to like research everybody that came in. So I used to call the promoters. I'm like, okay, what can you tell me about this guy? Who are the top people in your fed? Who would you recommend? So I would call I would call maybe 15 or 20 independent promoters and talk to them and try to get their feedback. And then I started carrying a notebook. And I mean, I've still got a notebook here. I always have a 5 subject notebook with me from these PWI days. Whenever I'd go to a wrestling show, I would take notes. And just at the end of the year, when it came to 500 time, I'd go through all my notes of all the matches I'd seen for that year. Here's somebody who I think should make it. Here's somebody who's underrated and needs some love, and you know, and that contributed to my own mental breakdown, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, cage match has definitely helped a lot. The internet in general. I mean, all these, you know, God bless these people. I don't know why they do it, but compile all this data. Pro Fight.
I used to chase stuff down on MySpace to see what I could find,
right.
because it was all that was there. And you know, and before that, it was just like you said, the packets and the VHS tapes.
I definitely have the advantage of the fact that doing, you know, that first chunk, it is more familiar names and people that you know. But also with the first 10, it could be pretty tedious. Top 5 highlights, so you've got to go through a whole year of stuff. And what are the biggest matches that they won? You've got to put together their ranking for every year ever for the top 10. You know, their path to number 1, their path to number 2. That's become a little bit easier in recent years. One change that Kevin made that made things less complicated in one way, more complicated in another, is like this fun fact thing, right? So we used to be a height, weight, and then last year's ranking, how many years, and we got rid of height, weight, and for a lot of good reasons. It would vary from year to year. Wrestlers, you know, weights change, their build weights change, all that stuff. But then these fun facts could be pretty tedious. Like you know, and I don't want to get like too repetitive. So like I end up like, you know, what's their favorite pizza topping, or what's their favorite movie, or stuff like that. So, and just that little bit can be, it's my own fault, you know, because I want something interesting, but I could lose like a half hour trying to find that fun fact for, you know, number 23 or something like that. So anyhow, head on over to pwi-online.com and subscribe so you don't miss the 500, which will be out shortly. Dan, while we're on the topic of independent wrestling, I wanted to kind of like tie a bow on conversation we had in the last episode about the Raja Jackson incident, which was a story I just like became obsessed with for a few days. I just thought like there was it encompassed so many of the frustrations I have with the pro wrestling industry in one story, and so many takes on it, and I agreed with some takes. I very much disagreed with others. For what it's worth, Brian, I think the one who was most spot on was Jim Cornette, and maybe I don't know if I should be saying that, but I heard him and I thought almost 100% yes, this is what I feel. But there was also a lot of people that, you know, wanted to completely sort of separate the wrestling business from having any responsibility on any of this, and just saying, well, this was, you know, a thug kid who just beat somebody up. All this was an assault, and you know, we don't need to take anything more of it. And I mean, I agree it was an assault. I think he should be prosecuted, whatever that, you know, that is. I think there's some exaggeration about, you know, putting him in jail for the rest of his life for attempted murder or anything like that. But I think, like, unequivocally, there is so much to say about the wrestling industry from that incident, and I thought about it as sort of like, you know, if on the baseball analogy, if the Yankees brought me in to close a game, right? They're up, you know, one run in the ninth, and they need a closer, and they call me in to close the game, and I give up, you know, 6 runs and they lose. Is everybody going to be mad just at me for having get up the game, or you get mad at the Yankees and the league for doing something so incredibly stupid? And that's where, like, I've got a lot of frustration. Where, what the hell was this guy doing in a spot in a wrestling ring at a show after everything that went on backstage? And I just think, like, all of the different a sort of point of failure, like almost all the way down the line, I think the people involved in the wrestling space of this made the wrong decision again and again and again and again and again, with one exception. I mean, the only thing that you could look to that happened, and you're like, finally, somebody knows what he's doing, is the guy, and I forget his name, who ran in and grabbed and pulled Raja off of this guy. But, you know, and look, there's different levels of blame when you're talking about people who are so inexperienced. So I've heard people sort of like dumping on the referee and some of the other workers. In some cases, they weren't even legal age. What was going on here. But I just thought the whole thing was an incredibly bad look on wrestling and independent wrestling. Dan, you've worked in this space. You've been around independent wrestling your whole life. Am I being too critical about how this was run, or do you agree that what you saw there was unprofessional, even by independent wrestling standards?
Yeah, you're probably not being critical enough. It was so. I booked a promotion in the Buffalo area, and I worked for some of the ballpark brawls as kind of the backstage agent and everything. And I've been around wrestling, you know, with PWI for forever. But when I was running shows, I would get to the venue literally at around 6 in the morning, and I'd be there. You know, show would begin at 7 or 8, and I'd stay there until 11 when we finished up. You know. But I get there early because I wanted to make sure everything was right. And I'd go through and I make sure that the ring was good. I'd check all the ropes. I would check the padding. I would check the guardrails. I would just, it was more of a just paranoia, I guess. But I wanted every aspect of the show to go according to plan, leave nothing to chance. I remember we had somebody who used to sing the national anthem, and he was related to one of the other workers. He was his brother. And one day he came up, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to do God Bless America." And no, you're not. You're doing the national anthem. We go from this to this is, no, I want to change it. No, we're not changing up. This is how it is. And Cornette, from everything I've seen, I used to go to some of his tapings in OVW and everything. He's the same way. He wants to dictate every aspect of the show. And I kind of get that. It's number one, because you want everything to go as according to plan, and make sure that there's no outside, no surprises, no variables. So saying that, this guy being at ringside, this guy getting into the ring, this all of this stuff, my God, there's no way it would have ever happened under my watch. Because I mean, I almost fired a guy because he was going to sing America the Beautiful instead of the national anthem. Like, we're not deviating from the plan, and you're not going to spring this on me as people are walking through the door. We're not changing it. So the way I look at independent wrestling is you need to be on this. You need to be hyper vigilant, because you have 20 people who are all trying to get noticed, get over. They all want a audience reaction, and they may not be thinking of the good of the show or the company or anything else in that moment. They're looking to get themselves over, and you have to really kind of have a disciplinarian background to keep everybody's egos in check for the good of the show, the safety of everybody. You're not running along. You're not doing anything that needs, that can go wrong. So with independent pro wrestling, I know this is a lot of backstory here, but you really need to be authoritative, and you need to be responsible, and most of all, make sure that nobody gets hurt. And like you said about the failure points along the way, somebody was not doing that. Multiple people should have been doing that. He shouldn't have been at ringside. The moment he got up towards the ring, he should have been swarmed. Referee, like you said, should have jumped in. A lot of things should have happened differently. But
Go
the
back
main
even
thing,
further of him being backstage, if you want to call it backstage.
he shouldn't have even been at ringside after that altercation. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you could also criticize, I think there's some evidence of this. I think whether this actually happened or not, some people could debate. Drinking backstage, and how protected was that backstage area in terms of the only people back here are the people who are part of the. How much was there kind of open for friends and family to be coming through?
Not even just the independents that I saw. It wasn't as locked down as I would have liked it. People could get in back, and generally, okay, it's this guy's girlfriend. It's
Yeah.
it's okay. But I remember going to like Ring of Honor shows, and there were people backstage who just had no business being backstage. I remember, I think it was Ring of Honor. It might have been a Super 8. I can't quite remember. But one of the guys who was a featured guy, he went on to TNA and everything else. He was there with his girlfriend, and they had a little dog and a couple friends. And it pissed me off so much because everyone's watching the monitor, everyone's talking about the event, everything. And this guy's off in the corner, not putting together his match with his opponent, not doing anything. He's playing with his dog and his girlfriend and his friend. And it's just like, man, how disrespectful and unprofessional is this guy to do this in the locker room? So that attitude, it used to be the locker room used to be tied the lockdown. I remember when I started with PWI, I got backstage with WCW and with ECW, and man, it was like, you know, you had to pass security clearance. You know, what's your ID? What's your credentials? Who can confirm for you? And you get back, and it's like, okay, this is your area. You can hang out over here, and over time, you get a little bit more leeway. But that all changed in the early 2000s, and then the locker rooms just kind of opened up, and people looked at it like, you know, I know this person, and nobody polices it anymore. So I can see that the locker room being
camera, streaming video. I mean, I get that locker rooms, backstage areas, you always have to have some allowance for and you got to trust that people aren't going to bring people in there. Everybody's cool, right? I mean, like everybody sort of gets it. Nobody's going to do something that could make the show look bad. But letting a streamer camera with a camera shooting live on the internet backstage at a wrestling show, like who thought this was a good idea?
No, you can't have that. I mean, obviously you're right out, and not even out of the locker room. I'd have the person out of the arena. You know, you can't be streaming stuff like that.
Yeah.
Who knows what you're going to pick up with a live camera? You know, so yeah.
Yeah, Brian. And any more thoughts on this since we last talked? And I'd like to say that there've been new developments. There have been a lot. I mean, thankfully, Psycho Stu, I think, is home, and the it looks like he's going to be okay. Thankfully, but no arrests, and it doesn't sound like much else has happened. And I worry that no lessons were really learned out of this whole thing.
Well, it's like what we talked about last week, and you mentioned Jim Cornette's response, and it's similar to my own, where, I'll say it. Here's the thing. Gatekeeping is important. It's become this negative term today, and sometimes it's ridiculous in certain spaces and things. It's uncalled for. There are times when it's necessary for quality control, there's a mentality today, which that is in some places that I disagree with vehemently, which is this idea that pro wrestling is for everybody. Everyone can do it who wants to do it. Like it's a big fun party. And this is absolutely the antithesis to the view of the functioning wrestling business. It's not for everybody. It should be hard to get into. It should be hard. There are rules you have to follow. There's etiquettes. There's protocols. Those things are important. It's not fun playtime with your friends. You should have to clear certain hurdles and things and meet certain standards. Those things are important. Why? Because otherwise these things happen. That's why. That's one of the reasons why. So yeah, I mean, I've been saying that for years with even just the whole concept of the indies in general, where a lot of times it's like you just get a bunch of your friends together on the weekend and, hey, we're in the wrestling business. Well, are you? That's where we're at right now. That is the wrestling business now.
Yeah, that's where I don't want to say I'm sympathetic towards Roger Jackson, but I do think that it's a little more complicated than has been let on, because I do think one thing that has become more clear since the incident is that to some extent this was supposed to be a work. Roger was invited to go into the ring and have some kind of spot, some kind of exchange with Psycho Stu, and it does sound like it was understood that he may lay a one of these in. So this idea of work a little stiff with him. But he doesn't know what he's doing. This guy does not know pro wrestling. You tell an MMA fighter who doesn't know the first thing about pro wrestling, lay some of them in on him. This is what you're going to get. He's going to just, and he said, I'm going to hit him until somebody pulls me off of him. And unfortunately, it took way too long to do that. But I do think in his mind, what's the big uproar about? This is what was planned,
The thing is, he didn't sell any extra tickets. He didn't
Yeah,
add anything. There's
who the hell is he?
There's no upside to this, and that's where it's again, like you said, the kind of failure points. It should never have been an idea. Like, untrained person in the ring. Why? What are we going to get? We're going to get a few extra views on social media, like for a F-list celebrity, using that term loosely. It was just badly thought out, even worse executed. Just terrible idea all the way around.
Yeah, and I think the other sort of thing that should be a lesson to people, especially aspiring pro wrestlers, and I don't want to dump necessarily too much on Knox Pro, which I'm really not familiar with, but like you really have to vet where you train and who you work for, because there are a lot of outfits that are run by, you begin with the premise that somebody who is teaching other people or professing to teach other people wrestling or anything for that matter should be experienced in it, right? I mean, and certainly Rikishi has all the credibility in the world to run a wrestling school. And his name is on it. I don't know how directly involved he was or wasn't. I don't know if he was basically sort of the money behind it. But this Black Pearl character, who I looked him up. It seems like he had an okay career on the indies, but never made it to the big show or anything like that. And that's fine. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who have had credible careers who didn't necessarily make it all the way to the major leagues. A lot of them are training people for WWE now at NXT. But do your homework before you go sign up for a wrestling school, because I think the quality of education that you're going to get is really all over the place.
Yeah.
And certainly, if possible, you want it to be run by people who are experienced and have experience on the highest levels of the business.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of the problem even starts there, where we went from like there are no wrestling schools and how do I get into this, and it's like getting into the mafia. How do I figure this out? To now, every indie guy who worked a few shows in 1989 can open up a wrestling school and teach people. And this is not to say, here's the weird thing. We always used to say in WWE that the people who are the agents, usually, there's some exceptions, are not the people who are the biggest stars in wrestling or who made the most money. Because if they made the most money, they wouldn't need to be agents. And in their old age, they might have saved it. But so it's like a catch-22. But the thing with the schools is, I'm not saying you have to be a huge star main event guy to teach people how to wrestle. Not at all. But you had to have been at the top level. You had to have been around it. You had to have, you should have a lot of experience and understand. Like the best example is Larry Sharp. Larry Sharp opened what was really kind of the first really big major wrestling school, the Monster Factory. Larry Sharp was not a huge star in wrestling, but Larry Sharp worked in the WWF. He was enhancement. He was on the mid card. He was around all the big stars. He worked with everybody. He knew how to work. That's what's important. That's what you need. And that's what you don't always get now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here locally in Long Island, we've got Creative Pro Wrestling, and they've put out, MJF, Chris Statlander. I can go on and on. I mean, their track record is really good. And at the helm over there is Brian Myers, the former Kurt Hawkins. I mean, this is not a former world champion, but he's a guy who probably has like 20 years plus working, in some of the biggest companies in the country, and gets it. It's like very often how back to baseball, the most successful baseball managers and coaches weren't necessarily the best players. But they were observant. They absorbed it in a way that others didn't, and they're able to, they're just good teachers of it. So those people are out there. Find them, and just buyer beware with some of these other places. We can move on. Let's talk a little bit of current events. I mentioned at the beginning, news just coming out of the last couple of days. As of now, it's not official, but WWE is teasing a big announcement tonight as we're recording this on SmackDown Friday. And it sounds like the news is going to be that WrestleMania is going to Saudi Arabia in 2027. Just incredible how far we've come from, those first Saudi shows, which I think rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And there was even some question as to will they continue doing this? There were some members of the WWE locker room that didn't want to go and have nothing to do with them. And now all the way to they're going to put their signature show, the biggest wrestling event on the calendar for any company in Saudi Arabia. I want to get your thoughts. I mean, I think it's, it is the latest example of this new corporate TKO WWE being first and foremost about maximizing profits and less so serving their fans. That said, they're serving their fans in that I think the quality of WWE's product has been really good. But they just announced a couple of days ago Raw coming back to Madison Square Garden, and these are the kind of shows I would go to all the time, and go over to Ticketmaster and grab some seats for $50 or whatever. The lowest ticket price to get in is $280, something like that, to go see Monday Night Raw in Madison Square Garden. Insane. And now this is the late example of there is no other reason than to put WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia. It's just sort of nakedly cynical. We're going to get a crap ton of money for it and screw our fans who love going to WrestleMania and travel there and make it a destination each year. It's become sort of the family vacation here. And I'm telling you, I'm not planning on going.
Oh, you're not going to Saudi Arabia, Al? No.
Yeah.
You and pretty much everyone else that travels and goes to these things every year, sadly, but they don't care about that.
What are your thoughts?
Well, the thing is, at times like this, though, I will say this, especially now they've been doing this for years. I try to separate the people from the government. So I try very hard to do that because it reminds me of when they would try to bring cultural events to the Soviet Union back in the day,
The Moscow Music Peace Festival.
Right. Things like that, and you'd go, okay, it's like a cultural exchange, and you try to look at it that way. Like, these people are not complicit. They're just people living in a country. But I think what makes this different and what makes it gross for me and for a lot of other people is it's the way that the company is just so flagrantly just in bed with that government. That's the thing. You didn't get the sense of in the Soviet days, maybe I'm naive or whatever, that didn't seem to be a huge part of it. Yes, they'd have to get permission, of course, from the Soviet government to do these things. But this is just like this front and center, lovey-dovey partnership with, look, I'll say it, these are the opinions of Brian Solomon, a murderous, intolerant, anti-democratic regime. And that's what makes it uncomfortable for me and a lot of other people. So,
yeah, even if you don't believe those things, there's also the aspect of you're taking it away from your fans. I mean,
yes.
I could.
Yeah, but I understand that. But that would have been the case, I think, not for everybody, but for a lot of fans if they brought it to London. Or if
I was about to say that, but no, well, look, you're right. I mean, it's not to say that there aren't WWE fans in Saudi Arabia, I suppose, and I guess we could debate what the difference is between even London or to a lesser extent, Toronto or what have you.
Well, Toronto you could drive to. That's not really that bad, right? I mean, you could get there from New York in a few hours,
Yeah, but I mean, I guess this is very much like a Western
yes
kind of entertainment, and you're taking it away. I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could debate this, but it does feel like why do they get to have WrestleMania, that sort of thing. Dan, when you were at the magazine, had they done the first Saudi show already?
No, I don't believe they had.
I think.
But what I'm curious about with this announcement, if it is going to be WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia, is whether or not it is going to be the real WrestleMania or if they're just going to do like a Saudi WrestleMania. something like that, like the greatest Royal Rumble. Right.
Yeah.
And if they do that, or if they did, I mean, it would be crazy. But WrestleMania night 1, night 2, night 1 in the US, night 2 in Saudi. I mean, different crews, obviously.
No, I wouldn't hate that'd be a lot more palatable, I think.
And I mean, you look at what they did with WrestleMania 2 with doing 3 different cities in one night on a show. So I mean, they've tried something, bonkers before. So maybe they could do something like that. And if they had a separate WrestleMania in name only for Saudi Arabia, fine. Greatest Royal Rumble. Nobody remembers it. It was fun. The fans liked it. It made WWE a ton of money. Do something like that. That's fine. But I don't think that if hopefully that's what they're doing, because moving the actual WrestleMania, the cornerstone of WWE's year, to Saudi Arabia, I mean, like you've both said, it's just it screws over the fans. It's distasteful that they're supporting that regime the way that they are. But if they can find a way where they just split it between the two countries, I think that's a good way to make the money and keep the home fans happy.
Is there, it makes me think your point just now, Dan. I mean, is there also part of the story where they're just kind of watering down the product to some extent? Because another thing that came out this week in the context of promoting Wrestlepalooza, this new event that they're going to have on ESPN that's out of Indianapolis, is they talked about Wrestlepalooza potentially being sort of the new WrestleMania or another WrestleMania. And this is on top of SummerSlam being 2 nights, and I think it's a matter of time before the Royal Rumble becomes 2 nights. They're all stadium shows now, and not just a Backlash will be a stadium show. Everything is sort of kind of looks like WrestleMania these days, including every show they do in Saudi Arabia. And on one hand, you don't want to begrudge them from being super successful, that they can fill a stadium with all these shows, which is great. It shows that wrestling is really healthy, or at least WWE is really healthy, that they could get that many fans into a building. But also, it's one of these things where when everything is super huge and the stadium show and the biggest show in the world, it kind of makes all of them a little less special, and certainly at WrestleMania less special.
It's the pendulum, right? I mean, if you follow wrestling for any given amount of time, there's the boom and the bust, and the boom and the bust, and it kind of goes up and down. And right now, fans are they like the spectacle. They want the fireworks and the pyro and the 6-minute entrances, and you sing along with Seth Rollins' song and Cody's song, and it's the pageantry. And that's what's very popular right now. So it can sell out those stadiums. But I think that pendulum, and because of things like this, like oversaturating the market with premium live events, not even pay-per-views anymore, premium live events, putting it on Netflix, having the shows in Saudi Arabia, I think that pendulum is kind of at the top, and it's going to start swinging back the other way. I think we've gone about as far as we can go this way, and it's going to come back. And you see that in wrestling history. You've seen in the 80s, after a huge spike, the original WrestleMania up to WrestleMania 3, and then kind of dropping back with house shows in WrestleMania 4 and 5 and so on. You've seen that in the 1930s. I've got the book on Ed Don George. Ed Don George was wrestling in front of 30,000, 40,000 fans in 1934, 1935 for a couple of events. But by 37, 38, the wrestling business had dropped down, and it's in front of 2,000, 3,000 fans. So I think that this is just something that's inherent in pro wrestling. And right now we're at the point of pageantry. A lot of people like the escapism that pro wrestling provides. But once we get to the point where it's costing $280 for a Raw ticket, that can't sustain itself for much longer. It's got to hit that tipping point and scale it back.
Yeah.
I think the market kind of necessitates that.
I've even read in a few places that part of the strategy of doing this, and it may be wishful thinking of people who just are hoping that the prices come down, but part of the strategy is that TKO and Endeavor wants to hit this as hard as they can while the product is hot, because they're trying to pay down all the UFC debt, all the really bad losses. I mean, they were bleeding money because of UFC things that they inherited. And I think they're trying to close that gap. And that's part of why they've been so aggressive with all this. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And it's a good point, because that's the thing about pro wrestling is that it's as hot as your top stars are at any given time, and they all have a shelf life. So, it's a matter of years. 10 years from now, well, maybe he will. I don't know, but it's Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns and these guys, are they still going to be on top? I would expect not, or at least they're going to be joined by. You need to create some new stars, and you just don't know how well those stars are going to hit, and they are in a time where the product is really connecting like it hasn't in a long time. So, yeah, I suppose some of that is just sort of supply and demand economics. If I want to go see, Oasis been touring lately, and I was hoping they did a couple shows in MetLife Stadium, and it's a huge thing because Oasis hasn't been together forever. Even in the stadium, you couldn't get tickets for less than $200. I imagine like the average ticket price was probably $600-700. I could go see. I saw Simple Minds at Jones Beach a few months ago. I think I paid $25. Right, so that's the reality, right? So I get it. Like, well, you're hot. You're gonna push it as much as you can. You're gonna see how much the marketplace could take in terms of like trying to grab every last dollar. But at some point, it is sort of like distasteful, especially with with higher ticket prices. I could, there's even things that they've done where I think like that's really smart. Like they do a thing now where they'll take a picture of everybody in the stadium. And it's sort of like, the roller coaster at Disney World or something like that, right? And then you got a picture of you when you come off of it that you could buy for some ridiculous price of you coming down, the big drop at the roller coaster. And now they're doing that for some of these shows. And you can look up, here's you seated at WrestleMania, and get like a close-up picture and buy it for some amount. Monetizing things like that, I think is fine. I think selling ads on the ring and stuff I have mixed feelings about it, but I get not leaving money on the table if there are ways to monetize things. But stuff like, just ridiculously jacking up ticket prices, so you are excluding, the average family, middle income family of four, or taking your biggest show and moving it to Saudi Arabia. It just gets to be a little gross, I think, after a while. So,
and just speaking of monetizing things, I'd like to say that the PWI podcast is brought to you by Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons, fine beverages and breakfast foods. Tim Hortons.
Gorilla Monsoon was a big fan of Tim Hortons, I was told.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the thing with Shapiro, actually, the what is he, the president, the VP, one of those TKO masterminds over there, Mark Shapiro, he said in a conference yesterday, sometimes these guys now at this level, they just say stuff where they don't even care what people think anymore, like the Nick Khans and all these people. They just really say these tone-deaf things that piss fans off. And he said in an interview or some kind of conference that, Vince McMahon never maximized the potential of the earning power of selling tickets because he was marketing towards families, as if that's some terrible. I mean, only he could make Vince McMahon into a babyface.
I was going to say, are we really to the point that we're
as if that's some terrible, stupid thing to do? What was he thinking? Marketing towards families. Well, what about those families then? Oh, I guess they just can't come anymore.
Yeah, and we've talked about here that's where UFC is at. I mean, you can't go see UFC. UFC is about to come back to Madison Square Garden. I'd love to take my kid. I can't imagine we're going to find tickets for less than $500, to get in the building. So it's just off the table. So anyhow, on the subject of Wrestlepalooza, this new event that we have, a couple of real marquee matches that they're pulling out, and one that I'm surprised how much interest there is the return of AJ Lee, and Dan talking about those early years of the women's issue. What I think WWE is so good at, and I was so impressed by, is making people who weren't that big a deal feel like a really big deal. Because the reality is that AJ Lee was not like some legendary icon. She was sort of middling, maybe slightly better than average.
She was struggling for TV time in her prime.
The whole thing is very weird.
And now they're like headlining with AJ Lee,
right?
And
for them, I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, is make people feel like a big deal. And I think they nailed this.
Somebody made a point online. I forget where I saw it. I'd give credit if I could remember it. But the idea is that AEW is giving us these incredible matches, but WWE is giving us these incredible moments. And the matches you forget about because you see them on Dynamite, you see them on, and they just float into the ether. Great spots, great matches, but when they're done, they're over. And WWE is giving us these, like the AJ Lee return. Who would have thought that would have been such a big deal? But it became this iconic moment. And yeah, and she was never that big of a star. Becky Lynch's whole oversell of fear, though, was just over the top. I know it was necessary, and she's trying to play the house. But the thing is, the fans were chanting AJ Lee when that segment started.
Yeah,
she's getting in public's face saying, "Who are you going to bring? Who are you going to bring?" The obvious answer is AJ Lee, right? And then it still shocks her when AJ Lee shows up.
Well,
there's
that's
no
just wrestling, though, Dan. That's wrestling, you know.
But you got to play it down. There's got to be some kind of nuance to it, you know. I mean, make it when the heel is completely oblivious, it's no good. When the heel thinks that they've figured it all out and then it changes, then that's, you know.
Some of that is on Becky, though. I just don't think she's very good at that sort of thing. Yeah. She's not good at that sort of thing. But you know, this is to WWE's credit. Here's the thing. I'm sitting there and I'm scratching my head going like, all right, AJ Lee. She was like not really that big of a deal. I don't know. And my son is 8 years old. My son wasn't even born yet when she wrestled there. And my son is all in, sold that this person is a big deal. Oh my God, it's CM Punk's wife. Oh my God, she's gonna kill Becky Lynch. He is on board. He has never seen her before. Didn't know who she was until 5 minutes ago, but they did it. You know what I mean? Like, so good for them.
I mean, the way to have done it and I guess maximize the surprise is to pull that out the first time that a Becky slaps Seth, or even the first time, you know, at Clash of Paris where Becky comes in and I get drawing it out over several weeks, but in terms of surprise factor, you know, they made it so clear that this was coming for weeks and weeks and weeks. Where if they had like week one had AJ Lee just come out of the back or something, she happened to be there and defend her guy, it would have been a bigger shock. But I'm not criticizing because I think it was executed to perfection.
Yeah, it was a great moment.
Somebody posted online that if it was someone like a Vince Russo or something like that who would always book these insane swerves in the old days, they would have, you know, everyone's expecting, oh my God, his wife is going to come in to help him. They would have revealed that CM Punk is actually married to like Nia Jax, and Nia Jax would come out and kill Becky Lynch. You know, just to freak everybody out, and then
if it was Russo, then AJ Lee would come out and she'd make out with Becky Lynch. You know,
right? Yeah, and
like, nobody expected that, bro. Right?
Yeah. Awful. Good stuff.
And Dan, did want to spend some time talking about your book. You know, the only person who might write about it is something even further back in time than Brian is used. You go back to the 20s and 30s. Ed Don George, I mean, not a name that I imagine a lot of modern fans are even familiar with. Tell us a little bit about him, and you know, what, if anything, could modern wrestling fans learn from a guy, a figure like this?
Yeah, Ed Don George was a fascinating guy, and he's one of these kind of forgotten pro wrestling stories. So he's a contemporary of Lou Thesz when Lou Thesz was starting out, and Strangler Lewis, and Gus Sonnenberg, and a lot of people that we've kind of heard of or know of. Ed Don was a 3-time world champion in the 1930s. He was an Olympian for the U.S.
What does it mean to be a world champion? I was reading the book description that you sent, and you know, it's not WWE world champion, it's not NWA world champion. He's just a world champion.
He was a world champion out of, it was Paul Bowser was the promoter. He ran what became the AWA. It was known as the AWA, but not until a little bit later on. But he was a prominent promoter who had New England, and he also cross-promoted in California with Lou Darrow over there. So he had a stake of having a real national champion, somebody who would go throughout the U.S. as world champion. Now, there were a few different groups that recognized world champions at various times, especially during the 20s and into the 30s. And at times, you could have 5 different people claiming to be world champion in the US. And the sports writers were always writing about it and how fragmented it was. But that's when you had these one of those matches I talked about in front of 30,000 people. It was Ed Don George defending his claim to a world title against Dan O'Mahony, who also had his claim, and it was essentially a unification match in Boston. But he was a fascinating guy who wrestled throughout the 30s, was one of the biggest sports and entertainment stars in the country during the Great Depression. He got out of wrestling after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. He enlisted in the Navy. Because of his background in wrestling and pro wrestling, they had him go to Chapel Hill and train all of the cadets coming in hand-to-hand combat. So he kind of basically helped the Navy rewrite their hand-to-hand combat guide. And then after the war ended, he stepped out, decided not going to go back to wrestling. He became a promoter, ran wrestling in upstate New York and in Miami and in Cuba. And he was running in Cuba until Fidel Castro came in and they had the revolution. So he's this kind of guy who he didn't stick around that long. His wrestling career only lasted about 11 or 12 years, and then a lot more as a promoter. But he made a ton of money in a time where, it was the Depression. He invested it well, and he could kind of leave at his own, at his own time. You look at Fez, and Fez wrestled for 40 years or so. Strangler Lewis wrestled well beyond his time. And they kind of needed the wrestling business, and that's why they're so well remembered, I think. Ed Don did a good job with it, and was out. And you kind of talked about the lessons that can be learned. I think that the great lesson that's still relevant with a guy like Ed Don George, during the 1930s, you had all these multiple claimants to the world title. You had Gus Sonnenberg, who was a big star, whose star was starting to wane a little bit. He was having some troubles at home. He was alcoholism and a turbulent marriage. The wrestling business is kind of going through a bit of a down era. Strangler Lewis is getting to be perceived as too old. But they put the belt on Ed Don George, who was a great wrestler, a former Olympian. And I think that's the thing that's still relevant. In a time of tribulation, a time where there's a lot of uncertainty, once you put the belt on a guy who makes it look real and believable, it kind of stabilizes the business. And you see that with Bret Hart when Bret Hart became WWF World Champion. You've seen it with Bryan Danielson when he was Daniel Bryan when he was in WWE. It's something that I think is Kurt Angle, another one in the 90s and early 2000s. When the business is kind of struggling and trying to get its legs under him, if you put a wrestler who looks real on top, everything kind of gets back in order.
Yeah. When you talk about the 20s and 30s, I mean, contrasting to the conversation we had earlier about how, the sport is so open now that you could have a streamer backstage an independent show and be broadcasting online, how they're planning out an angle. How protected was the wrestling business back then? How much of it was a work, and how much were people aware of it being a work?
People were surprisingly aware. So you go back through the newspapers of the 30s, and sports writers were openly saying, as predicted here last Wednesday, Ed Don George defeated Henry DeGlane. Why? Because he had a better drop kick, and because that's what the matchmaker wrote in the script. And they're writing that in the 1930s, Yeah. So I mean, people were aware of it. I mean, there were some fans who would argue the point. The wrestlers, for their sake, they always maintain kayfabe entirely. But most fans knew, as they always have with wrestling. It doesn't matter whether it's predetermined or not. It's the presentation and the show. And I don't know what's going to happen. I may suspect that this guy is going to win, but how are they going to tell that story that gets there? Yeah. And I think that that's a universal with wrestling. That's why it maintains its appeal.
That makes me think about something. I'm going to be interested in both your thoughts, and this certainly relates to Wrestlepalooza coming up. What's your comfort level with ESPN being involved with WWE? And I imagine that's going to mean a fair amount of coverage of WWE events on ESPN. And they do some of this now, and whenever they do, it's always sort of awkward and weird, where they're kind of trying to walk that. They'll be interviewing Seth Rollins and And it's like, you've got a big match coming up on Saturday. How are you preparing? How could you possibly take on, whoever, and what are you going to do to win? And it's all just sort of a little like, if we're trying to pretend to be real journalists here.
Well, the last time ESPN dabbled in pro wrestling, I think, was the AWA Team Challenge Series. So they don't have a good track record, I don't think. No, it's the same thing when ESPN, they don't air hockey. At one point, they had hockey on, and they would do these same things where, like, hey, let's all talk about hockey. But it came as so forced, and it's out of their comfort zone that it felt weird. So yeah, I think we'll see some of that. But I think that with WWE Unreal and some of the other things that have been out recently, I think the world's mainstream America, at least, has gotten more comfortable with the idea of what WWE is and how to present it. And you just talk about it like it's a plot line on The Walking Dead or whatever show. So I think it'll be a little bit cringe, but it'll be okay. I think ESPN will do fine with it.
Yeah, that's
better than the Team Challenge series.
It really is a strange full circle thing for people. I think it depends of what your age is, honestly. Like, it's one of those things, like, I don't think necessarily a younger person would blink so much. But for me, and well, for all of us, growing up in a time when the mainstream, quote unquote, legitimate sports media and things like that, they wouldn't touch wrestling. They were horrified by it, especially in big urban centers like New York City and things like that, in LA. It was like embarrassing. My grandfather was involved in boxing, and he tolerated the fact that I was a wrestling fan, but it was like, there was a purity that, as a sports fan and a sports writer, that you didn't want to touch things like that. It would contaminate what you did. But now it's like you see Sports Illustrated covering pro wrestling. Like, think about that. That is insane. Like, they talked for 40 years about Hulk Hogan being on the cover of Sports Illustrated because it was such an insane thing to have happen. And Forbes, this always blows me away. Forbes, which is like, I don't know, this like stodgy financial magazine, covering Wall Street and the business world. They are one of the biggest reporters on professional wrestling online now. It's like a cottage industry for them. And I just think it's just changing times. I don't know how else to describe it. You've got, ESPN now. I'm more concerned about the subscription fees and putting everything on a new streamer than I am with them touching wrestling. But it's just a sign of the times, I guess.
Yeah, I think the positive part of it is that you get closer to moving away and doing away with this image, this stereotype of a pro wrestling fan as like a mark, an idiot that doesn't get that this is fake. And I saw Chris Van Vliet do an interview. This might have been old, but this came up recently with some podcaster, and I couldn't believe that there is still this line of questioning of, it's fake, right? And I just can't believe. I've always thought that, like, it's gone full circle in that it used to be, the moron, the fool was the one who thought pro wrestling is real. And now it's the one who even bothers to ask that question, right? I mean, you're the one who looks like an idiot when you're asking that somebody. So I think that the plus side potentially of an ESPN getting behind WWE and sort of legitimizing it is that it starts to sort of bring into public consciousness like why people like wrestling, and it's like, no, we don't think it's real, but you sort of hope that people start to get the appeal of it as theater, as sports entertainment. I mean, sort of kind of trying to grasp this gray area where there's very much athleticism going on, but also storytelling.
And it's just compelling television.
Yeah.
Period.
So interesting thing. This happened to me this weekend. My wife and I went out to a big antique thing that was going on, the world's largest garage sale, all these vendors and stuff. That we stopped for lunch afterwards on Sunday, and we are going to go to Destroyer Park Golf. which Dick the Destroyer Buyer had set up. He brought it in from Japan. It's his Park Golf course. It's real big over there. It's the only one in the U.S. But so we stop at this little bar restaurant for lunch, and I overhear a guy at the other end of the bar saying that his son is a pro wrestler. I'm like, oh, okay. Kind of peek up, and he starts talking to a guy. I kind of chime in. All of a sudden, there's 5 or 6 people in the bar area, all talking wrestling. And the bartender, the woman behind the bar, she was a former student of Dick Buyer. So we used to go to Park Golf with field trips and everything else. And there were 5, 6 people in there, and they were talking about pro wrestling, but they knew it all. They were all talking about, oh, did you see the Stevie Richards podcast? And you see what they said. And it's one of these things where it used to be everyone was kind of ashamed to be a wrestling fan, or you wouldn't talk about it or whatever. I think now, like, everyone is still following it as closely as ever. Once they realize it's kind of a safe space, everybody jumps out. And
Well,
I think that ESPN legitimizing it even further is going to create more of those safe spaces. I don't think there's as much of the fear or shame of talking about pro wrestling or being a fan, like you're saying, Brian, with sports writers not touching it. I think everybody's on board with it now. They just need somebody to kind of break the ice, and then all of a sudden 5 complete strangers are talking about the Stevie Richards podcast.
Yeah, the attitude towards it has definitely changed, and I compare it to because I'm a big fan of comic books, and I've written about superheroes and comic books. That's another thing, that whole like nerd culture thing. I hate using that word nerd. It's like everybody uses it now as a positive, or I'm sorry, I think I'm just traumatized. But the thing is, that whole culture now is very mainstream, and it's not something people are ashamed of. It's big money. It's big business. It used to be, you talk about wrestling fans being characterized as morons and rubes and marks, right? In popular culture, if you watch movies, TV shows, whatever, if you wanted to, the idea of when you show like a grown person reading a comic book, right?
Yep.
That was shorthand for this person is an idiot.
Yes.
This person is a child who never grew up.
Pro wrestling was right there, with
right. That was how you symbolically demonstrated that this person is not to be taken seriously.
In movies, like somebody's, you pass the camera through, somebody's watching TV, if pro wrestling's on, that guy's an idiot. That's what they would do in movies and shows and stuff.
Right. Yeah. Now it's like, comic books are like Shakespeare to a lot of these people. They debate it like it's, Dostoevsky or something. So we've come a really long way.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do wonder if there is a downside. I think it's more good than bad, but I just think it's some just kind of growing pains. And we've talked about like sort of the awkwardness of these media scrums after wrestling shows where, they're trying to kind of walk the line between treating this like a legitimate business sport and then also trying to sell storylines. I still have a level of sort of discomfort when in the middle of Raw, Michael Cole starts plugging Unreal and they show a clip from Unreal. And it's That's just weird. Like that line is too blurred right now. And I wish they would figure out a way to clean it up. I don't know if ESPN helps in that direction. I'm really interested in and there's already been some of this, but how will the coverage of these events go, and the downside of it, I think, is that, the reality is that covering pro wrestling as a journalist, doing a good job of it journalistically, means being very critical. And the reality is that there's a lot that goes on in wrestling, as in all industries, but maybe in particular in wrestling, that is unseemly. Is ESPN going to touch on any of that? It was the awkwardness of at these media scrums when somebody would ask a question about, Vince McMahon's sex scandal or about steroids or anything like that. Is that all off the table now with WWE and ESPN being in bed together?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's going to cause conflict down the road because WWE historically, you remember Vince McMahon on Bob Costas. Vince McMahon, Bob Costas starts asking a difficult question and Vince flies off the handle, It's a different era, different ownership. But WWE is going to have to be a lot more willing to answer difficult questions if they're going to be at.
How are they going to get them? I mean, that's the question. I mean, is WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia? How critical? How much is that decision going to be scrutinized by an ESPN? I don't know. Or is it just all celebrated?
It depends where the money's going, I guess. How big of a cut ESPN's getting, or it's going to make some interesting situations in the months ahead, definitely.
Yeah. Dan, tell people where they can get your book.
You can get it at basically the best way is through Scott Teal's Crowbar Press, so crowbarpress.com. Certainly if you follow me on social media at all, if you bump into me at a show, I've got a bunch of them out in my trunk of my car right now. I'll sell the book anywhere, but you can find the book on Ed Don George, biography of one of wrestling's underrated stars. They just put up a monument to him in his hometown in North Java, New York, which is very cool. So he's kind of getting a little bit of a resurgence in terms of recognition and popularity, but you can get a copy of it through crowbarpress.com.
And where can people follow you on social media?
The best way is really Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but I don't ever really utilize it. But just find me on Facebook, and I'll do what I can to send you books.
All right. And Brian, a lot of news on your book, which I saw as of yesterday. You could officially, not as of yesterday, but I checked yesterday, and there it is on Amazon, so I could buy it now.
Pre-orders.
So how are things going?
Well, I mean, I don't want to step on Dan here. We plug my book every week on here. I don't
There's enough time and space to plug two really great wrestling books.
All right. Well, it's Irresistible Force: The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. I've got it right here.
You got it. Great.
It's good.
I love the font. I love the cover design. It's fantastic.
I got to give credit. I'm really good friends with a producer at NXT. He's a friend of mine from the WWE days. His name is Brian Kunzman, and he lives in the same town as I do. And I was torturing myself over what to do with the cover because I didn't want to do the same old, like, oh, it looks like a fight poster. Oh, it looks like a wrestling magazine cover. So many wrestling books do that. And he suggested this font, which is like the mid to late 80s, like WWF. I forget what the term is, the lettering that would appear on television to give the names of the wrestlers and everything. And I was like, all right, that's the way to go. I'm proud of it.
Absolutely.
You could also use it as a doorstop, a paperweight. You could probably give someone a concussion with it. But it's on sale on September 30th in print or digital. And the audio book, I just finished recording it, and they're going to do some editing and things. And they tell me, I mean, this is an impressive turnaround, I guess. Because there's no physical product that has to be manufactured, but they tell me it's going to be available next month, the audio book for it, because I know
terrific.
A lot of people look for that too. So we'll see. It had hit number one for a moment until AJ Lee came back. It hit number one on Amazon's wrestling book chart just based on the pre-orders alone. So that's kind of cool.
Does AJ Lee have a book?
Yeah, it's not new. It's called Crazy is My Superpower. So the books right now that I always think it's cool when my books get close to the top, because that means that all these other wrestlers and people are going, who the hell is Brian Solomon? But so like the ones at the top all the time right now is AJ Lee's book. Becky Lynch's book is still selling well, especially the audio book. And Tyrus's book, which it's because he's on Fox News every week. His book is always, I'm talking for years. He has like 2 books and they're always in the top 10 because of that. Oh, the other one is the Karrion Kross book. That's really big.
Oh yeah.
That's selling really well. So, but mine is in that rarefied air. So I'm excited. We'll see. Now, once it actually comes out, we'll see what people actually think about it. So.
Yeah. I find that it's about Karrion Kross here. I mean, we won't get into it now, but I've got some thoughts on Karrion Kross.
Okay.
Let's save it for
another show. Yep.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much. We're right around the 1:15 mark here. So we'll head out. Dan, thanks so much. Good to see you. Happy anniversary.
Yes. Happy anniversary. Thank you for having me back for this auspicious occasion. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks so much, man. And Brian, good to see you again, as always. And we will be back soon.